Good morning, Laredo. Welcome to 24/7 Laredo Talk Show. It's an original, free, and independent news and lifestyle channel dedicated to talk about the issues about Laredo and surrounding areas. Today we have a very special guest, but before we introduce him, I want to remind you, please press the like button on your Facebook page so we continue to give you shows like this. Thank you for joining us again. We're here with Judge Danny Valdez, who was the judge for more than 30, well, at least 30 years, in 32 years as a county a position of some type, and we're glad that he's able to be here. Before I talk to you about the other position that you had, if I can go back a little bit about the JP position, you dealt with a lot of kids who had drug problems. And so I would imagine back then you didn't have many options, and you were one of the ones who was leading the youth village. Can you tell me how, basically, how big the problem was back then?
It was a big problem, Judge, and it was just getting started, but it was already a big issue with the drugs and the gangs also.
Right.
In fact, I was the first one that organized the gang summit. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
To bring the gangs together at Martin High. Never
Yes.
forget that.
I remember you.
Yeah, we had about 4 or 5 different gangs, and everybody was all kind of. But the idea was there was a lot of gang issues, specifically in the west side.
I mean, the public the public needs to understand. There were literally more than 20 gangs, juvenile gangs in Webb County. Judge Valdez decides to call all the heads of all the gangs in Laredo. And they actually, for some time, they signed even a truce of some type in writing.
Actually, they signed a peace agreement.
A peace agreement.
Basically, what they did is they turned in their colors, because all of them had different colors. So actually, it was a pizza party. That's how I was able to get them in. But actually, what happened is we had them in separate rooms.
Right.
And actually, they ended up signing what's called a peace agreement, and it really is hanging there at Martin High.
Right.
The actual agreement, and they turned in their colors, and the colors are in the agreement. But we had to do that because it was getting out of hand, and kids were in the drugs and in gang violence and stuff. But we were able to quell the gang problem back then.
Exactly.
But one of the other things and I have to give credit where credit's due, because you were the one that initiated the concept of a youth village.
Right.
And then I came in on board with you, and to be
Well,
able to.
all the judges,
all the judges came
JPs.
in, but the original concept was originated by you, and then the other judges, we came in to help support
Yeah,
the
yes,
original
I remember.
concept of a youth village, which was the detention, prevention, and intervention.
That's right.
That was the original concept of that.
Right, and we all got together, Judge, back in 1998, 21 years ago. We passed the resolution to fund the youth village.
Correct.
In 1999. And we're now 2019. Let's take it from there.
And one of the things, when then I
It's tough.
ran for county judge, and one of the things that I wanted to, because the original bond money that was allocated for the youth
Right.
village was not enough.
There
Because it took so much time.
Because it took it took 2 county judges after you,
Right.
by the time we got to you.
So we ended up with just the detention
The
facility.
detention facility,
So,
yes.
so when I came on board, I said, we need to continue the original concept
Right.
of the youth village. So we were able to get funding for the JJP,
Right.
and we also got funding for the drug treatment
Right,
facility.
exactly.
So it's just in the third phase.
They're still in the third phase. Hopefully they'll get it done out here this year, next year. And I'm glad, because really at the end of the day, it's for the kids. It's not for any of us, because at the end of the day, we saw a need. You dealt with the issues of gangs, and you dealt with it. We saw the issues of drugs. We dealt with it. And which takes me to the issue about a judge, how you see a judge. Sometimes we see a judge as a person who sits behind a bench and makes decisions. But you were an activist. I don't know if I want to say the word activist judge, but you were an activist.
I was criticized initially, Judge, because I never wore a robe. I was a judge, but I never wore a robe. And people would ask me, why don't you wear a robe? So because, basically I want people, when they go into the court, especially the youth, I want to be a mediator, more than a judge. I know what the law states, and that the statute says, and the rules, I know that, but I want people to feel comfortable. And basically, as a justice of the peace, basically that's what you are. You're a mediator. You have families there with issues, whether it's a neighbor issues or problems with the neighbors, or problems with the husbands and wives, issues like that. So I saw myself more as a mediator than a judge. And that's how I carried on. I carried on, more as a mediator, trying to resolve issues.
Right. And when I became a judge 2 years later after him, and I followed your your mentorship, and I did never wore a robe. And of course, people don't seem to understand this, but at the JP level, most of our conversations, many of our conversations are in Spanish. And it may be sounding odd in a country that mostly speaks English, but the people in our community speak Spanish. So it was a lot of the issues were talked about it and dealt with in Spanish.
And most of the time, a lot of the issues, even if it was a civil small claims or a peace bond, you were able to resolve it there.
Yes.
You know, it's just communication. I've always said communication is important. Basically, they would go in, I remember people would go in with a peace bond or domestic issues, and they would walk out of my courtroom holding hands. I said, well, because, you know, I was able to mediate it and
Yes.
resolve it that way.
Yeah.
And that's the role. That's the role of a justice of the peace. And that's how I saw myself. And I carried on, you know, that way, you know, throughout my
To
career.
some degree, it seems like your daddy had something to do with it. Because he obviously played a big role in your life, and he helped a lot of people as well. So you come from a long family of helping a lot of people.
You know, it's something that I took with me when I took office, because my dad told me, I'll never forget, he said, mijo, vas a entrar a una posición donde puedes ayudar gente, ¿verdad? Y usa esa posición para ayudar. Use that position to be able to help. Yeah, you have certain times that you just can't, you just have to rule, but most of the time, especially at the JP level, you're able to resolve through mediation the
right.
issue. And
That's right.
that's how we were able to, I guess that's why I lasted 24 years.
Well, then after the 24 years, Judge, I mean, you obviously for a while then started thinking about running for something else. What made you decide to run for county judge?
Well, being there 24 years, Judge, I was able to look at issues in the county. I was able to hear the problems out in the community. And I felt, for me, it's never been a title or the prestige of a position or you want to be this, you want to be that. Is how can I impact lives in a broader sense? I knew very well that I had done a lot as a justice of the peace, and I had reached a level where I was already couldn't do anymore. So I felt, well, where can I impact lives in a broader sense? And I started to see issues, and especially in the colonias, people still didn't have any running water. That was a really big issue for me. The issue of an at-will employee, you know, people were getting fired for political reasons, and that constituted a lot of litigation. I looked at all this and said, well, that's not right. Because remember, I come from a family that's a union, and how can we protection for the employees?
Exactly.
So that was the first thing that my dad told me. You get in there, see how you can help people out. So I said, the only way that I can do that is to get in there and be able to see if we can make those changes. And that's what it kind of instigated more than anything.
Right. And during that period of time, there were several changes occurring that happened.
When I came in?
Right.
When I came in, the first thing we did was, see, we didn't qualify. We were the county was an at-will county. Basically, what that means is, you know, anytime anybody can come in and say, you know what, you didn't help me in the political race, or I don't like you, I'm going to fire you. So
Right.
I didn't like that. So we went through. We didn't qualify for civil service, but because of population. Civil service is based on population, and we didn't qualify. So we had to go through legislation. We had to amend the statute to be able specific for Webb County. To bring the population down to be able to qualify for civil service.
Right.
So we pushed for civil service, and now we have civil service, job protection,
Right.
which is basically what we wanted.
Right.
Now, this doesn't mean that if you're not doing a good job, you
No,
can't get fired.
No, but
you
it
just
at
have to
least
go
gives
through
you
a process.
a process.
Correct.
Something to remember, there's more than 25 or 20 public officials in the county, and it was at will.
Yeah.
You get fired for just because your boss didn't like you anymore.
And if you remember back then, Judge, there was a lot of lawsuits filed.
Yeah.
I remember in a particular year, there were about 80-some county employees that filed lawsuits because they came in.
Well, that's
an
what
official
happened.
came in and fired
A new official would come in and fire everyone. The sheriff's office was one of those positions where people get fired. And so obviously then it just comes all the appeals and all the litigation that goes with it. But that issue got resolved then later by getting a civil service commission
Correct.
for the sheriff's office, and it sort of gives some protection now. Judge, are there any particular issues that you see in a county level that needs to be dealt with, that the commissioners are having to deal with now?
Well, one of the things, Judge, that I've always looked at, the colonias. You know, I know that when I came in, one of the big issues that I wanted to address was lack of running water in the colonias. There's still a lot of people that live out in the rural area of the county. So there's still a lot that needs to be done at the colonias and the colonial level with the people that live out there. I mean, it's unfortunate that they still live in those type of conditions. The other thing that we looked at, if you remember, that I think it's important, when I came on board, we didn't have, now we have a fire and EMS services.
Oh yeah, that's one of your last things that you did when you were you actually literally the last 2 months you started the fire EMS
And there's a story to that.
And
I can tell you that because it's important. Before I came on as a county judge, the county was paying the city $800,000. So you remember $800,000 for fire and EMS services for the county. Then all of a sudden they turn around and the city says, "Look, you're gonna have to pay us $5 million to be able to provide fire and EMS services to the county because we can't go out there anymore." So how can you go from $800,000 to $5 million? We couldn't do that. So I was literally forced to develop a fire and EMS services.
The last minute, I remember.
The last minute, but we were able to get it done.
Right.
So now we have fire and EMS services for the rural areas. But again, it was something that we developed when I was there. We also we're real close to developing an MOU with the state of Tamaulipas, you remember, for a fifth bridge.
Yes.
I think
They
that's
got very
something
close. It's something that's still out there pending.
Yeah, that's something that needs to be looked at.
The issue of water, it just surprises me a little bit how the county, I'm not sure if you remember that time or whether or not that's an issue. Maybe it's not an issue for you, but it just seems that Laredo or the county web owns the water plant in South Laredo. And yet we're still buying water to supply for all the different areas around, all the colonias around town.
Correct.
I don't understand that part where we're spending literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for water when we have a water plant that the county owns that could just be pumped out and supplied to all the tanks around the Webb County. I mean, how come that issue is still out there?
Well, I can tell you, Judge, that water's it's also been an issue for us when I was in the county. Well, we were always looking to develop a secondary water source because it's a necessity. And we were working to get that. I remember we were working to get that project done with the city and some of the surrounding counties because it's important. Secondary water source is important. We do have a water plant, but it's not. It doesn't have the capacity to be able to do that.
Right.
But it's important that we look at that. I think it's important that the county looks at developing a secondary water source. Because again, we can't depend on the river,
Well, there's two aquifers close by. I don't understand also how one of them runs a little bit north of the county.
There's one that's real close. That's something that we looked at that should be looked at, which is the Carrizo Aquifer.
Right.
It's not that far from here. So I think that's an option that's there.
Right.
That I think the city had looked at. We looked at it. I think it's important that
I think you and Judge Mercurio Martinez, someone suggested maybe a little mini dam on the northern part of Webb County to save this secondary water source. And I'm not sure, I just don't understand why we just.
Well, I think the opportunity is there, and I think there's options, and I think there's, again, we looked at the aquifers, and the Carrizo is a prime example of what's available. We just need to get the minds to come together to be able to get it done.
Right.
A lot of times what happens, judges, there's change in administration. You get a certain an administration working on the project, and then there's a change, and things change.
Priorities
But
change.
there has to be, now is the time to be able to
Water should
come
always
together.
be priority number one, obviously,
Correct.
for the county. Anyone who works for county commissioners or state representatives or any other position it's all about the water because that's going to be the future battle as far as I'm concerned, other than environmental issues.
And we've seen the growth.
Yeah.
Judge. I mean, we're growing so much that eventually we're going to have that. Unfortunately, Laredo can only grow north and south.
Right.
And that's where the growth is occurring. And that's why we looked at the fifth bridge to be able to get the traffic
Alleviate
out.
the traffic out.
Get the traffic out and maybe an outer loop. That was in the master plan, and that's also.
I think I saw County Judge Louis Bruni just last week say that he wanted the fifth bridge to be built. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone's going to pick up that mantle, but I would hope someone would consider that in the future as well.
And I think the state of Tamaulipas was ready, and we had an MOU ready to go. But again, things change, administrations change,
Right,
thinking
priorities change.
priorities change. But water should be a priority.
Should always be a priority. On an issue dealing with water, one of your longest projects that you've had has always been the fishing derby.
Correct.
I'm going to be a little bit light in terms of a topic here. Tell the public about the fishing derby.
Actually, we're in our 30th year, Judge, and it's a program that we started 30 years ago with Texas Parks and Wildlife, where we take children with special needs fishing. Basically, what the state does is they donate fish, and we net a little cove in the lake, and they're all physically challenged kids. And I've seen them
And they
grow.
go and they go with their parents.
They go with the parents, and they actually get to catch
They-
fish. They compete. They get to compete. It's a program that started with about maybe 25 kids, but way back then. A lot of these kids started when they were 3 or 4 years old. Now they're adults. They see me out in the community. Say, Judge, are you gonna do the fishing derby? You gonna do it? I say, yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna be celebrating 30 years of our fishing derby. We're in the planning stages of getting it done. But again, it's the only one in the state of Texas that caters specifically for physically challenged kids. And we have, I'm very fortunate to have the state of Texas who
Right.
donate the fish. We have Parks and Wildlife, we have the lake, Casablanca. We have a lot of corporate sponsors that come together to be able to get these kids
And
to
they
be able
come.
to go out and enjoy. It's probably the only day out of the year that they go enjoy the outdoors with their parents, but they look forward to it. And they ask me all the time, are you going to do it? So we're going to do it.
Well, it seems, Judge, you seem to be very much involved still in community affairs. What advice would you give a young person who's thinking of running for office or being involved in community affairs? Why does it matter?
I always say, Judge, the advice that I give them is get involved. Get involved, in the community, start at a certain level. But, for people to see that you really care. That you really care about helping out, whether it's special needs, whether it's, with the schools, whatever project is out in the community that caters to families. The unity is important.
Yes.
Judge, and I've always said, and you've seen it and I've seen it, everything starts at home. Everything starts at home, and we need to get the families involved. And that's one of the reasons that I started the fishing derby, is for families to get involved. A lot of these kids never had the opportunity to go to a fishing derby. Now you have families coming in with their brothers and sisters, and I mean, we had over 1,000 people there at the last
1,000
event.
people,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, because now it's a family event. That they want to participate, they want to be part of it. But I always tell young people, get involved, help out, and be seen in the community. And I think that if they do that, and they have aspirations,
Right.
hopefully we need a lot of help, a lot of support in the community. We have young minds. Everything has changed now.
Things have changed, which takes me to the last question. Well, actually, you still seem to have a sense of community, and that hasn't abated in the last 30 years. Are you still intending to be involved in the community?
Of
for the
course,
next 5
of
or
course.
10 years?
That's what I've been doing, Judge. I know I've enjoyed my retirement.
Yeah.
But of course, it's in me to
Right.
be able to see. I've been traveling. I've been traveling, visiting with people, talking to people, and getting feedback.
Right.
And getting feedback, and very positive feedback. But it's in me. It's always been in me. Since I was a little kid. How can we impact lives? If I can do it here, we'll see that. We'll see. Well, if I can do it here, we'll see. But for me, it's not about, again, I repeat myself a lot, but for me, it's never been about titles. It's never been about prestige. It's never been about anything other than giving back and helping, because I still remember what my dad said.
Yes.
How
Well,
can you help?
That's a very good advice for you to take on, to give to others. And I'm hopeful that some of you who are listening will be able to take that advice to heart, because it's very good advice. People should continue to be a part of the community in whatever capacity, at the minimum going to go vote, at the maximum for them to run for office and participate and become involved in dealing and resolving issues. That's what I've seen in you, Judge, the last 30 years.
Judge, and it's important to clarify that, because it's a good point that you just mentioned, that we still have a lot of apathy.
Right.
We have the people. It's important to get involved, especially during the election time. Go out and vote. It's important that you exercise that right that you have, because we still have a lot of apathy. We're getting 25, maybe sometimes at the most 30% people going out to vote. But you need to make, if you want change, and you feel that things need to change, then go out and vote, exercise that right. So thank you for bringing that up, but it's important.
Definitely, and one thing, since I've been out for a couple of years now, I'm realizing that unfortunately, public officials are not connected to the public, and therefore they have some of them are just not attracting voters. Hopefully, they'll do a better job next year. But I want to thank you, Judge, for being here. I want to let the public know, please continue to stay involved, running for office, or in fact, registering to vote and voting, or just get involved with your church. Get involved, be a part of the community. By doing that, I can assure you, what you did, Judge, for many, many years in saving lives and helping other people, people can do that. It can be done by anyone. They don't need a title to be a judge to be able to do that. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you, the public, for listening. Before you go, please press the like button for 24/7 Laredo Talk Show, so that way you can continue to stay informed in projects like this. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge. And Tatis.
Thank you.